Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the RPG Backlog. I'm ProfPlaysGames. This is the podcast where I go through my backlog of RPG games and play them. Lots of games in my backlog that I haven't played. Usually I do the podcast with friends, but I'm doing some interstitial episodes in between the arcs of the podcast on my own. So for this podcast, I am doing Super Mario RPG. This has been on my backlog, honestly, since it came out in 1996. But the remake by Arte Piazzo came out on the Switch in November of 2023. And it's been in my backlog since then, so I played it in the last week and a half, really, with my daughter and had a great time. So I'm going to talk about it, do this podcast on my own. I'm also recording this one. I think I'll video record the solo podcasts, put it into the audio feed, obviously on the podcast. But for video watchers, this is also on the Prof and Dev Play Games podcast feed. The RPG Backlog is an offshoot podcast of our primary podcast, Prof and Dev Play Games. So please check us out on podcast services of your choice. But Super Mario RPG. It's a game that I've heard about for a very, very long time. My friends played back in the day, but I just never had the patience. I don't know why. Back in the day, back in the 90s specifically, I didn't have the patience for RPGs. There was a lot of watching my friend Travis, who I just did the Final Fantasy 12, the RPG Backlog podcast arc with. Watched him play Final Fantasy 7 a lot, and that was my first real introduction to RPGs, and to be honest, I thought it was boring. It was just a lot of what I know now is grinding. It was basically just battling enemies over and over and over and over again to level up yourself, level up weapons. Wasn't a lot of fun for me. Didn't look like a lot of fun. So I just never really got into RPGs. The closest I got was Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time when it came out in 64. I know it's not really an RPG, but the complexity of the dungeons, my cousin and I would play, and it was just so much, so dense, and the propensity to get lost was so high that I just never really got into RPGs until much later. And it's kind of part of the reason why this podcast exists, because I'm digging into those RPGs that I missed, and one of them is this one. Now that I've played this one, it's a very approachable RPG, and that's the thing that I like the most about it, is that it's not too tough, which is maybe a criticism now that I've gotten more into RPGs, is that the boss battles were not too tough. There weren't a ton of puzzles to figure out. I could figure out which bosses had what weakness and kind of score more damage on them with that character with that weakness. But for the most part, there weren't a ton of puzzles. And the end of the game, there was certainly a boss rush where there were just lots and lots of bosses. So it was really just a bunch of almost damaged sponges and trying to take them out through brute force, really. And I'll get more into that as I discuss the game. But I want to kind of take it back and think about where this game started. And it was a game that was developed by Square before they were Square Enix, and published by Nintendo. And it was on my favorite system until the Nintendo Switch, which was the Super Nintendo. So this was kind of the start of the Mario RPG canon, as it were. Not really a canon, but the sequences. This began it, and then Square moved on to, Final Fantasy 7 came out the next year, right? This came out in May of 1996 in North America. March in Japan, and Square was working on and then moved on fully to Final Fantasy VII and the PlayStation, right? They moved on to the PlayStation, so this was kind of the sequel to this did not come from Square, and the sequel to this ended up being Paper Mario. So Nintendo started with the Mario RPG, moved into Paper Mario, moved into Mario and Luigi, and kind of left behind really the deep RPG roots after A Thousand Year Door, which was the Paper Mario RPG. So this, being developed by Square, being developed by a company that is so synonymous with JRPGs and RPGs in general, this is a very RPG take on Mario, which is silly to say because it's Super Mario RPG. It's in the damn name. But I really liked how, like we're seeing on the screen here for audio listeners, they're at the store buying different items. You can upgrade your equipment. You can go searching for different equipment, looking for some of the best equipment in the game. There are some side quests and things that lead to the best equipment in the game. That you wouldn't normally stumble across. For example, Mario, to get his best weapon, which is the lazy shell, you need to get a seed, and then you need to get fertilizer. And the fertilizer is found in, I think it was Nimbus City or Nimbus Town. Off on the side, you have to walk across the sky to find Bezos, who is the flying shy guy, and get that. And you might not stumble across that, so you might not be able to go back into the clouds and find the best weapon. However, for example, at the end level, there is a series of 4 rooms that you need to go through in order to advance the story to get to the final boss. And at the end of 4 of 6 of those are super impressive weapons for the main characters. Not Mario. I don't believe Mario had one there. Maybe there is. I didn't do all 4 of them, but there was upgrade for Bowser, upgrade for Geno. There was an upgrade for I think Mallow as well. So that's cool. But then, like, Peach's best weapon, which is a frying pan, was called the metal plate, appears in Moleville much, much, much later in the game, and only if you went back. For the most part, I was just moving forward with the story, moving forward with the different cities and areas and towns, so I didn't backtrack that much. But this game sort of rewards players who do backtrack a little bit. With some of that gear, some of those weapons. And Mario's major weapon, for example, you get 2 copies of it. So you can use one as armor. If you give it to Peach, her armor is incredible. She barely gets hit late game. So there's ways to, like, min-max, which is really cool for folks who are really into RPGs. But if you're not, like playing with my daughter's 6, and this is her first RPG, to be honest, that she's played significant chunks on her own. And significant, I mean, like, levels here or there, or sections here or there, chunks here or there, with me sitting next to her. And it's you having to choose between the attacks, choose between the specials, kind of think through how you're going to approach the battles. But if you don't min-max, you still have a chance to find victory, which is nice for my daughter specifically, because she's not min-maxing. She's trying out the different specials, and it was kind of cool. And I know many people have said this previously, but my daughter is primarily in school. It's Spanish, so her English reading is behind where her Spanish reading is. So we're taking these opportunities in this game, for example, with a lot of text, a lot of menus, to practice reading, along with many other things that we're doing on the side. And it's just cool to see her expanding her reading skills by playing this game, by reading some of the dialogue and reading the menus and things like that, and her having to choose, like, for example, when an enemy kills one of your party members, Mario goes down, or that's not kills, but knocks out Bowser or Mario or whatever. You have to choose your special skill, comeback. So she has a list of like 7 items, and she has to find the one that says come back. And she struggled at first, and then was able to pick it out. So then she knows come back and how to say that, how to pronounce it, and all that stuff. So it's kind of cool. Just those teeny little bits of reinforcement of her English reading through this game, which has been cool. So been enjoying that. To take it back, this is a party-based RPG. In the end, you can get up to 5 party members. You start with Mario, and then you pick up Mallow, who's this cloud dude. And after that, you get Geno, who's like a spirit who is taken a doll body as its host. That kind of sounds creepy, but it's not creepy in the game. So you have 3 characters, and it's Mario, Mallow, and Geno at the beginning. Eventually, you pick up Bowser. Bowser recruits you as some of his minions to join your party. So you're battling with Bowser, and eventually Peach joins you, which is really cool. Peach, for the most part, is a support role, healer role, typically that archetype for RPGs. Bowser's kind of a crusher or bruiser. Mario's strong as well. Mallow is more support, but does have some elemental attacks, specifically lightning. And then Geno kind of shoots things out of his hands and has lasers and blasts and things like that. So they all have their own strengths. And then there's a meter in the side that builds up to 100% over time. And when you get to 100%, you get to do a special move together, and the trio does a special move. It reminds me, this is silly because this was first, but Synergy in Final Fantasy Rebirth right now, where your characters do special moves together. Here, you have 3 characters, and the 3 characters you choose do this certain special move. Like Bowser, Peach, and Mario do this superstar attack with a shell, where Bowser turns into a shell, jumps up in the air, Mario kicks it, and then Peach throws a star at it, and then it does an AoE effect. Basically, when it hits the ground, it hits all the enemies at the same time. And then there's other combinations where it's Mallow, Peach, and Mario does like a healing rainbow, and the other combinations that do different attacks. A clown car attack with Bowser, Gino, I think, and Mario. So there's just variety. There's variety in how you attack with your special moves, which uses flower power, which is basically mana. So you're doing magic attacks, and then you're doing your regular attacks, and you can get different, equip different items to do those attacks. For example, a punch, or you're kicking a shell with Mario, or, like I said, Peach has a frying pan. Gino shoots things out of his fingers. So that's the variety there is really cool, and how you can approach the different battles, I think for the most part felt to me like samey. Like it did feel repetitive over time, but because of the variety of the characters, so you can swap in, swap out, the different specials, the different moves, you had a broad palette of things that you could choose from, and it made the battles more engaging. So that was really cool. Back to folks who worked on this. It was developed by Square, obviously, published by Nintendo. It was produced by Shigeru Miyamoto, which, obviously it's Mario, so that's his baby. I want to be there. But I think his production on this game really helped focus Square on not just making it an RPG, but making it the Mario RPG, where Mario's jumping, and some platforming is part of this game. So there are platforming areas that in the kind of isometric 3D perspective where it was a little hard to get a handle on where my character was in space. That was probably the most annoying part of the whole game, and it was just slightly annoying. And then some of his specials, he does fireball and he does jump. So a lot of these things infuse, Paper Mario or Mario and Luigi RPGs moving forward, but kind of had its genesis here. So having Shigeru Miyamoto, I just feel the fingerprints all over this game, where he is making sure Mario is Mario, which is really cool. On this game, the writers was Kensuke Tanabe and Atsushi Tejima. And Kensuke Tanabe, he works at Nintendo EPD. So this is a producer and designer who works for Nintendo. So there was a Nintendo fingers all over the writing here. The composer was Yoko Shimomura, which is a very famous composer, works on the Kingdom Hearts series. And I believe for this game came back and reorchestrated the soundtrack, if I remember correctly. I didn't play with the options too much, but I thought there was the option of having the original soundtrack or the reorchestrated soundtrack. I believe I have that right, but I'm not 100% certain. Should have looked that up. This game has come back to life a few times. Obviously, it was on the Super Nintendo. Then it came back to the Wii Virtual Console, the Wii U Virtual Console, and then was part of the Super Nintendo Classic Edition, which is where I first played it. On the Super Nintendo Classic Edition, I played it just probably for an hour, just to see what it looked like. And I just love the new art style. The old art style is, 90s pixelated. Looks good, but this, I just think it looks better to my aesthetic tastes. The other thing that stands out for me from this, the gameplay and the look, the feel, is... Wow, I just lost my train of thought by watching the video here. I really like the different biomes. So you're moving from area to area, and it doesn't feel like the original Mario structure, which is like we're in the Forest Kingdom, now we're in the Desert Kingdom, now we're in the Water Kingdom. There are those elements throughout. There's the clouds, you're going underwater to a sunken ship, but there is not, it doesn't feel like here's the forest, you come back, you leave and never come back and see those kind of things. Here's the desert, and when you leave, you never see any desert motifs again. It kind of feels like nothing's overplayed, nothing overstays its welcome, and nothing is sequestered to one part. I feel like we you either come back to different areas because of the story or to do side quests, or you see elements of like the forest later on, or you see Bowser's Keep, moving on to the weapon world, which is the factory where Smithy is making all the weapons for the game that you're fighting against. There's never too much, and there's never it never feels like sequestered, if that makes sense. It feels very organic. It feels very here's a little taste, here's a little taste, here's a little taste, and we're going to keep adding, we're going to keep moving on. It just feels refreshed. Every time you move through, it feels like a refreshed visual palette, basically, and it's really cool. For me, thinking back to early Mario games like Mario 3, where you're in a desert world and it's just like 7 worlds of desert, 7 levels in the desert, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that was pretty cool. The idea of the plot of this game, just to touch on it briefly, is the Smithy makes weapons. He makes a sword, for example, Exor, who basically attacks Bowser's castle and takes it over. So these weapons, there's spears, there's the sword, there's folks who are wielding axes, et cetera, et cetera. They're taking over the Mushroom Kingdom, and it's up to you, basically, to get Bowser's castle back for Bowser. But in doing that, you're stopping the enemies from taking over other parts of the Mushroom Kingdom as well, which is pretty cool. The development of this game started in '94, and it started because, at least from what I understand, Miyamoto wanted some sort of RPG using Mario. And Square was interested in this because they were hoping to expand their RPG reach with something, I think now we're seeing it with, I forget who it was recently was talking about, perhaps it was the producer of Final Fantasy 16, how it's, JRPG kind of felt limiting or pejorative even. Just want to have a more broadly appealing RPG, and I feel like this one really did that. Both with the IP, obviously making it more accessible to kids and broader audiences, but also adults too. I mean, I love this. This is, if whatever year I'd played this game in, it would have been one of my top games of the year. This is quite a fantastic game. Other than small nitpicks with the platforming, there's not really a lot that I'm complaining about. I think if you're a hardcore RPG fan, there could have been more crunchiness to the RPG. There could have been more crunchiness with the min-maxing. But I think that's its strength, is not diving too far into that. I think the battle system is just so iconic, and that's the other thing that really stands out and has come across in future games, obviously in the Mario RPG series, but also other games such as Sea of Stars, which was kind of an homage to some of the battle system, which is I don't know exactly what it's called. It's like the active button pressing, where you're battling, and then as you're landing an attack or as you are getting attacked, you hit the A button to defend or give some more vigor to your attack. And if you get it right, your attack does more damage, or your defense is like a perfect defense and you block all damage. So thinking about turn-based RPGs before this, Final Fantasy VI, Dragon Quest, etc., there wasn't that aspect. You choose your item, you choose your special, you choose your attack, and then it goes. And there's nothing for you to do in the interim other than selecting through the menu. But this keeps you engaged in the battle throughout. You're having to time those button presses. You're having to, pay attention as you go. And it's something that's really stuck with my daughter as well, who I didn't expressly tell her beyond the first time, like, this is part of the game that you could do. But then she really was trying to hit those buttons at the right time. And sometimes there's little menu prompts where there's like an exclamation point that pops up that's like really the time to do it. But it was new, right, for RPGs to do this. And then it has been replicated in future RPGs. I think even what was it? Expedition 33, Claire Obscure, which was just recently announced at the Xbox showcase. They had turn-based mechanics, but it had the button pressing in the middle as well, the active button pressing. So that's infused even games that are happening now. Like I said, Sea of Stars, and also this one as well. It sounds like the sales of the game were something that was exceeded expectations. Looks like, according to Wikipedia, it sold in Japan about 1.47 million copies, which was the third highest selling game in 1996. So that's pretty cool. And Nintendo thought it would sell about 200,000 units in a month in North America, but it exceeded that by quite a bit and was the most rented game in the U.S. for 14 years straight. That's pretty cool. And the sixth best-selling game in the U.S. in 1996. So that's cool. Sales expectations were strong. And then the remake looks like sold about 3.31 million. The Switch has a huge install base, so that makes sense. The reviews were positive, 9 out of 10 from IGN when it first came out. And then, gamers throughout time have kind of pointed back to it as something of a tentpole in the development of RPGs, certainly in Square's story, but also in Nintendo's story. Almost a high watermark for Nintendo in the RPG space, only because, in quick order, we got Paper Mario, moving on to Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door and GameCube. But then I think Paper Marios haven't been super well received since then. Color Splash, Sticker Star, it moved far away from the RPG part of this. I think that Origami King is in that vein as well. However, I just so enjoyed Origami King, but it doesn't have these RPG aspects like the Super Mario RPG did. It just has I think it has a pretty cool story, but there's not a lot of the crunchiness of the numbers for sure. There's just different weapons, right? And the weapons are really just like a hammer, and then like a metal hammer, and then a stronger hammer. But it's not like the secret special weapon and things like that are happening here. But overall, my thoughts on this game, just to keep this podcast short, just a superlative game. A really interesting role-playing game in that it is super approachable. It has really memorable characters. It has variety in the special attacks, and certainly in when you get your 100% gauge up, when you time those button presses exactly right, it builds up that gauge in the corner. When you get to 100%, you can use your triple move. Those are interesting. It's interspersed platforming. As you can see here, Mario's jumping on a barrel here, running down a river. It's certainly got that going for it. So it's Mario and RPG. It's really hitting both, running on, the gas is, what's the metaphor I'm looking for? What's the idiom I'm looking for here? It's full-bore Mario and full-bore RPG is what I'm trying to get at, which is really cool. It's something that is approachable in terms of length of game as well. RPGs tend to be super, super long, but this one, our playthrough was about 13 hours, and it was super doable, in chunks. We play in chunks, so an hour, hour and a half, and then we're done. And it was nice to be able to get through this in, week and a half, 2 weeks, as opposed to some RPGs that I play on my own that are like 90 hours. That's sort of daunting, and this is not. This is approachable in every single way. I know that Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario were, kind of the spiritual successor to this, but it would be really cool to see another RPG with, in this vein, like the original. I mean, obviously, you could have some of the original cast, or figure out some way to do all of them. Bring in new characters, bring in Rosalina, bring in Toadette, or whatever. I would love to see more done in the space with RPGs for Nintendo. Not only imagine this kind of thing, but like Legend of Zelda, that'd be so cool. There's a lot that they can do, and this last year, like the remake of this Super Mario RPG, and then the remake of the Thousand Year Door just came out, and now they've announced that there's a Mario and Luigi Brothership RPG coming out at the end of the year. So it's within the span of a year, they've kind of brought back two paths and then made a new one in the third pathway. So there's a lot of Mario RPG goodness happening, which is cool to see. So overall, those are my thoughts on Super Mario RPG. excellent game, excellent use of collaboration between Square and Nintendo. Kind of, honestly, it feels like a gold standard for love and care for an IP done by another company that's not Nintendo. Having Nintendo, there overarching like the production of it, sort of like the Super Mario movie done by Illumination, but it's just got Miyamoto's fingers all over it. It's just Nintendo through and through, and this was as well. Thanks so much for listening. If you like our podcast, please rate it on your podcast service of choice, or check out the video on YouTube, which is just me talking with Mario RPG playing in a larger window right next to my face. Whoops, there we go. Over there. Thanks so much. The next arc for the RPG Backlog podcast is going to be Undertale with my friend Scott. So I hope that you tune in for that and you enjoy that. Undertale was quite a ride. I've recorded the entire experience, and it's on my YouTube at Prof and Dev Play Games, so you can check it out there as well if you're into Undertale. And then those podcasts will start next week. All right, thanks so much, and I will see you next time.